Unmute the microphone and welcome back. It is episode 2 of Constitution class, where we will pick up where we left off. Pretty low energy today, so we're just going to go right into it. I think. Let's see. I need to figure out how to make more people show up to these streams. I'll start posting the first class is definitely live on YouTube now. It's up. When this one's done, I'll post this one. Maybe I'll start spamming all of social media with links to them so that people can start seeing it. Because I want y'all in here. I want everybody involved in this. Otherwise, it's just one crazy person rewriting things because he's neurotic and he has to. Anyway, let's jump into class mode. We'll pick up where we left off here. Section 4, Article 1. We just finished up Section 3. Got this a little bit better zoomed, I think, than last time. I realized that it was sort of standard size, but that's harder to see on a smaller screen for what I'm looking, compared to what I'm looking at. So it's big and blown up on mine now, but that's fine. Oh, cold where I am. Is it cold where you guys are? Probably. It's February still, right now. As of now. Excuse me. Alrighty. So, as last time, I prepped a bit going through, which is what I'm going to try to do every time, so that it doesn't take us absolutely forever to get through this document, because what we really want to do is get to the amendments. That's the part that people are going to care the most about. But we do have to get through all of the articles establishing how the actual government is set up and functions to work in order for us to figure out how to fix all the problems with it later. So, Article 1, Section 4, still talking about the legislature. That's what that's what Article 1 is about here. So let's read. The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as to the places of choosing senators. Okay. Now, rather than jump right into that one, let's look down here because they use the same phrase, and that kind of, this is why reading comprehension is so important, because we can look up the meanings in our fun dictionary here from 1828, but we can also understand the context that they're using it in based on how they use it in more than one place. So, next paragraph here, the Congress shall assemble at least once in every year, and such meeting shall be on the first Monday in December, unless they shall by law appoint a different day. So, by law, this phrase by law, capital L because they love capitalizing things, you could read that a few ways. But Congress may at any time by law, meaning by our understanding of this being a legal document, by law, they're allowed to do this, make or alter such regulations, except as the places of choosing senators. Here it says, unless they shall by law appoint a different day. So this is not the same by law, is it? Because it doesn't mean just the right to do it. Congress may at any time by law. Unless they shall by law appoint a different day. So this is an act of making a law, is what this means. Specifically, this isn't just because you can do it because you're the Congress and it's legal for you to do so. This is Congress may at any time make a law to alter such regulations. So they're allowed to change that law specifically, not just the allowance of Congress's legal scope here. So, knowing that, now let's jump here. Did we get the right? Give me my right. I want my red for editing. Everybody loves red for editing. Not too much different here. The times, places, and methods of holding elections for senators and I always say representatives. Silly fingers. Again, we're going to update this to modern instead of future tense, instead of shall be's. We're going to be is set in each state by their state legislature. Semicolon. We're still using semicolons. It's important to understand, while they decided to sort of have a flourish with the kinds of things that they capitalized as proper nouns, the times, the places, the manners, these can be proper nouns because they're capitalizing them in certain senses. But really the sentence structure and the syntax does make a big difference when you're reading this, and they didn't skimp on how they decided to write it. So we do want to try to, if not at least honor what it is to make sure it's still correct. We want to read it appropriately so that we understand which thoughts are which. See, because this is the second thought now. But the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as the places of choosing senators. That's a secondary thought. That's not the same because we've got a semicolon. So, fixing that, we're going to go with but Congress can, by passing a law, create or change. You want change, right? Press on change or alter. Yeah, alter, change. These regulations at any time. Anytime, well, see, and then that's not a period, that's a comma, except Congress cannot change which places are choosing senators. Again, see what we got? 4 lines there, slightly more than just 5, so slightly longer, but easier to understand. Times, places, and manners of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the state legislature by the legislature thereof. See, we don't need that. But the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as to the places of choosing senators. The times, places, and methods of holding elections for senators and representatives is set in each state by their state legislature. But Congress can, by passing a law, create or change these regulations at any time, except Congress cannot change which places are choosing senators. Simple. Simple enough. That's the goal. The goal is simplify. So now let's come down here. We already read this one, but we'll read it again. The Congress shall assemble at least once in every year, and such meeting shall be on the first Monday in December, unless they shall by law appoint a different day. So we're going to go with Congress must assemble. Thank you, Avengers, for making sure everybody knows what assemble means. At least once a calendar year, more specific. That meeting is on the first Monday in December. December. You're gonna have to excuse some of the initial spelling here too, but I'm as amateurish as the people who drafted this when it comes to that. I'm gonna do whatever I can. I don't think we have, right? We don't have, yeah, see, we don't have any sort of, this is too simple of a program for any good spell checks. We'll deal with that later. We know what the words are. We can go back and I can fix the things if we need to fix the things. Don't get hung up on that. Let's see. First Monday in December, unless Congress passes a law choosing a different day. Saying that's exactly what we wanted to have with this by law phrase. I'm going to remove any ambiguous reading is what we want to do. We want to understand exactly what this document says without interpretation, because it's not our job to interpret it. It's only really the Supreme Court and the higher judiciary's job to be able to interpret. But even then, we've got definitions for words. We don't really need to interpret. Words mean what they mean. All right. Section 5. Each house shall be the judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members, and a majority of each shall constitute a quorum to do business, but a smaller number may adjourn from day to day, and may be authorized to compel the attendance of absent members, in such manner and under such penalties as each house may provide. Here's where we start getting into, like, if you're not somebody who went to school for this, what does that mean? Well, luckily for you, I did all the work already. So, I'm going to show you what it means. Each House of Congress, we are going to be more specific than we need to be. Not just each House of Congress. Sure, that's the only thing we've referenced so far, but they've also referenced a vice president, and we don't know what that is yet because we haven't gotten to the other articles. Each House of Congress judges, present tense, the elections, returns, in this case, is referring to re-election, and qualifications of its own members. And a majority of each is enough to do business. We don't really need the word quorum in there. It constitutes a quorum to do business. They really liked repeating themselves a lot in order to make it sound like, to pad this out and make it sound more official, but that's all that means. You need a majority in each house to do business while you're there. So if you've got 51 senators, you can hold assembly. You can get stuff done if 49 of them are absent. But let's see, and that is also another semicolon, secondary Next thought. But a smaller number. Now, instead of may adjourn, I think everybody we know what adjourn means. Everybody's watched kind of enough Law and Order to get most of the general terminology, I think. But even then, in this case, what it's specifically saying is a smaller number can delay from day to day and can be authorized to compel, to force the attendance of absent members with methods, again we changed manner to methods mostly, and penalties as determined by each house. Now, we're not going to say House of Congress again because at least it references its own, within the same paragraph here, so that's all right. When it's new paragraphs, we're going to be specific each time. So, each House of Congress judges the elections, re-elections, and qualifications of its own members. A majority of each is enough to do business, but a smaller number can delay from day to day and be authorized to force the attendance of absent members with methods and penalties as determined by each house. So the real point of this is to say a few things. One is each house is responsible for determining its own qualified members, what they consider qualified, to ratify or, in the case of potential fraud, I would think, then, not ratify any of the elections or re-elections of people. If there's some question to it, the congressional house in question is the authority to decide that for their own members. But it also tells you that you need to have a majority in order to do business. You can't round up 5 senators and be like, 4 of them voted this way, so we've got a vote passed. That's not enough. You need a majority here. And in the event, this is really the subtext, in the event that you don't have a majority, the smaller number can delay, the assembly of Congress from day to day to go out and then try to force the rest of them. If you leave, it's not just you leaving. You can, be on official business to go out and try to get the other members to show up, basically. There's a lot of checks and balances here that are designed to make people do the job, because nobody then wanted to do it, and they assumed that no one would want to do it. So they've made as many kind of caveats and as safeguards as they could to make sure these jobs would get done. The idea that they would be so lucrative and desirable and people would be fighting for them through a level of corruption that we see today obviously did not cross anybody's mind back in 1789. That was not a possibility to them. It's quite the opposite. They're making people do the job just in case no one wanted to do it. Let's see. What else shall each house do? Well, let's see. Each house may determine the rules of its proceedings, punish its members for disorderly behavior, and, with the concurrence of 2/3, expel a member. So, if you've got 2/3 of Congress deciding to kick somebody out, they can kick somebody out of Congress if they want to. And they're like, you know what? You, out. Not too much different there either. Come on. Beep. Each House of Congress can determine the rules of its proceedings. There's not a particularly good synonym legally for proceedings, but again, I think everybody's watched enough true crime and real drama to understand that at least the most basic sort of court language. Not a good way to change proceedings. It's just what it is. Punish its members for disorderly behavior. Now that's extremely vague, and in an ideal world, we're going to try to fix that so that it's more properly defined, because I'm sure they defined it in their own documents, but here, from a constitutional standpoint, we don't have a definition for what disorderly behavior would constitute. So vague, but still accurate. And with the agreement of 2/3 of its members expel a member. Not that different there. A lot of these here, especially for some of the particular rights and powers that the legislature has coming up here, they're almost one for one. And like, hey, you can keep, like later on, it's going to say, you can fund a navy, and you're like, okay, that's a pretty solid normal thing. That's not suffering from the 18th century language too much. Here we go. And now, each house shall keep a journal of its proceedings, and from time to time publish the same, excepting such parts as may in their judgment require secrecy. And the yeas and nays of the members of either house on any question shall, at the desire of 1/5 of those present, be entered on the journal. This is the paragraph we got to fix for modern English, all right. Each house of Congress keeps a journal of its proceedings, and from time to time publishes it. It seems a lot easier to do there than publishes the same. Except such parts they judge to keep secret, which it is what it says. Disturbing for a lot of our Freedom of Information Act kind of things, but it's right there. If at least 1/5 of those present want to the votes of the members of either house, the yeas and nays, on any question gets entered into the journal. So let's try that again. Each house shall keep a journal of its proceedings, and from time to time publish the same, excepting such parts as may in their judgment require secrecy. And the yeas and nays of the members of either house on any question shall, at the desire of 1/5 of those present, be entered on the journal. Each House of Congress keeps a journal of its proceedings, and from time to time publishes it, except such parts they judge to keep secret. If at least 1/5 of those present want to, the votes of the members of either house, the yeas and nays, on any question gets entered into the journal. It's difficult to word things legally, I think, in a way that also introduces concepts, because this is the first time we've seen yeas and nays in this document at all. And it doesn't have, we know what that means in terms of how to vote, voting yay or nay from it, votes being kind of a yes or no simplified thing. But there's not an explanation for it, so I feel like it needed to be isolated more so that it is explained while it's also doing its job. Neither house during the session of Congress shall, without the consent of the other, adjourn for more than 3 days, nor to any other place than that in which the two houses shall be sitting. Lots of, it's all negatively worded. Remember what I said, they want to make sure that people aren't ducking out of this responsibility and they'll get a way to do it. So they've worded things very negatively overall through this document in order to make sure that nobody can get out of this. Nobody can bail on the responsibility. Nobody doesn't come back to work. They've made it more difficult than it needs to be because they've chosen a way to negatively reinforce what the laws are supposed to indicate. So neither House of Congress, while in session, we're going to keep adjourn here because that is what we don't mean delay in this case. We don't mean just leave for a short time. We mean entirely adjourn and not come back to work. Adjourn for more than 3 days, or to a different place without the consent of the other house. Right? Also simple. Now see that one we knocked a line out of. Potato, potato. That one's even shorter. Neither house during the session of Congress shall, without the consent of the other, adjourn for more than 3 days, nor to any other place than that in which the two houses shall be sitting. Neither house of Congress while in session can adjourn for more than 3 days or to a different place without the consent of the other house. So you can't move where the meeting is. These guys were really thinking of how's everybody going to try to break this? They were thinking in terms of loopholes immediately, because they were founded by a bunch of rebels, so they were trying to close off as many loopholes as they could. So it was what if we adjourn to a different room and then rejourn and come back, and I'm going to use that like it's the right word for it. It's fine. We're going to assemble somewhere else and not tell the other half of Congress what we were doing and then do a bunch of stuff in secret. No. You can't change the place. You can't leave for more than 3 days, and you can't change where the meeting place is. Easy. Now we are into section 6. All right. So we got to 4 and 5. in a half an hour. We're definitely going to run out of my notes probably before the end of stream again. Then we'll just keep going. Maybe not. I'm starting to dial in about how much content we can go over in 2 hours, so that'll be good. The more accurate I get it. Section 6. The senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services and be ascertained by law, and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. They shall in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of the peace be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses and in going to and returning from the same, semicolon. And for any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. Okay, so what does this mean? Now, compensation in this dictionary, I looked up already. You can get this online too, by the way, if you want to just look up Johnson and Walker's 1828 dictionary. This is just a PDF that I downloaded. So you can easily get this and follow along if you really want to. There is going to be at least another word in here that I will bother to look up with you, even though I did already. But compensation in this dictionary is titled as either amends or recompense, which both have its own definition for. I just find it interesting because it's supposed to be like even. Compensation, this specific word for, because it's salary, right? The senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services. That has been interpreted as some sort of salary, but what it really says is that this compensation is merely even bartering, basically. A recompense for, like, you've done your services, we'll give you something that's worth your services. Wouldn't that be more interesting? I wonder how many people feel like your senators and congressmen are worth what they're getting paid, because this specific word is supposed to be absolutely even. And it's not supposed to just be a salary. So let's see, what did we hear? We didn't change that word specifically because that's what it is. So the senators and representatives receive, see, I got no shall receive, just receive a compensation for their services. Let's see. To be ascertained, which is just established, as established by law and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. That part's easy and simple. They shall in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of the peace be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses and in going to and returning from the same. So that's one whole thought. So except for cases of treason, felony, and breach of the peace, congressional members, see how we're going to be so specific, they are privileged from arrest. And in this case, privileged is going to mean immune, right? Immune. Let's see. From being arrested during their attendance at the session of their respective houses, and in going to and returning from the same, and traveling back and forth to said session. So, this, very importantly, does not make them immune to arrest in general, right? This makes them immune to arrest except in cases of treason, felony, and breach of the peace, right? Those three still easily, this doesn't qualify. But unless you've done one of those things and you're being charged with one of those things, while Congress is in session, you can't get arrested while being in session or going to and from the session until the session closes, until Congress is adjourned, because that's another loophole that they were trying to close. What if we just arrest all of the people who don't want to play ball with us? What if we just want to do, like kind of a currently fascist propaganda, blah, 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 horrible, regime administration that's happening right now? We'll just start arresting all of the representatives who don't vote the way we want. Well, you can't. But that's only for going to and from and during the session, and here, and for any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. This one's really straightforward because it's just referring to what they're saying and doing as part of the job in the House. If you were, giving a speech, or if you were part of the debate that was happening on the floor in one of these houses over one of the bills, that's not going to be entered into like evidence if you get arrested for something else. Like if you're on the congressional floor and you're saying we need to get rid of all blank, and then you get arrested for a hate crime later because that's probably the kind of phrase you would use, then they wouldn't actually be able to use that instance of you being shitty because it happened in Congress. You were a part of the speech or debate you were using. So this is basically saying what you're doing here as congressional members officially can't be entered into like evidence for your other crimes and things. Your other crimes and things can still apply, with the exceptions and whatever else is going on, but not during the session. That's all. So, for any speech, this isn't really might keep that one capitalized actually, speech, because it could be a particular speech, or debate, and in either house they are not to be questioned in any other place. Here we go. Now this is the good one here. End of section 6. No senator or representative shall, during the time for which he was elected, be appointed to any civil office under the authority of the United States, which shall have been created, or the emoluments whereof shall have been increased during such time. Increased? They really it's little misspelling things that probably weren't officially a problem then, but it's still misspellings now. We can fix it. We can fix little stuff. There's no problem with that. We're keeping the meaning the same. That's the key here. And no person holding any office under the United States shall be a member of either house during his continuance in office. This is just no double dipping. You can't be a congressional member and be appointed somewhere else to be like an ambassador at the same time, or whatever else, or, you know, the head of the FBI and also a congressional member. Like, you can't double dip the jobs. You know, if you're a congressional member, that's your only job right now. So this one does take a little bit of doing here to fix the language. During their elected term, no senator or representative can be appointed to any civil office under the authority of the United States, which was created during that term, or to a civil office where the profits increased that term. Now we're going to look some of this up here so I can show you. So, that first sentence here. No senator or representative shall, during the time for which he was elected, be appointed to any civil office under the authority of the United States, comma, this is still the same thought. He can't be appointed to any civil office under the authority of the United States, which shall have been created. This is referring to the civil office, which shall have been created, or the emoluments, you know we're looking that one up, whereof shall have been increased during such time. Semicolon. So that's the end of that first thought here. So now let's look up emoluments, because boy, that's fun. I've tried to use the search here before. I've mentioned it takes too long to search this PDF. It is much faster to just, let's see. Let's see, we want to go up. There we go. Emolument. Profit or advantage. Emolument. So, you can't get appointed to any office under the authority of the United States which shall have been created, or the profits or advantages of which were increased during that time. So just because you got elected doesn't mean, oh, sweet, I can be a senator and something else is going to give me a big boost in money. No, not allowed. Second thought, and no person holding any office under the United States shall be a member of either house during his continuance in office. So if you were already an appointed official or holding some sort of office before, you can't keep holding that office while you become a congressional member. Let's see. No person already holding any office under the United States can be a member of either House of Congress while still in that office. While still, you know what? Well, not in, while still holding that office. Let's make sure that's still correct, right? Do they use holding? Yeah, they used holding up here as well. So that's a little better. During their elected term, no senator or representative can be appointed to any civil office under the authority of the United States, which was created during that term, or created during that term, or to a civil office where the profits increased that term. No person already holding any office under the United States can be a member of either House of Congress while still holding that office. Easy. No double dippy rules. And now we're at section 7. Oh, wonder if the mic picked that up. Section 7. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as on other bills. See what I mean by some of it being real simple? That one needs hardly anything. They are using bills as a proper noun again, as we will see in the next... Let's see. No, not next section. The section after that. Must instead of shall. All bills for raising revenue must originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate can propose or agree, to agree, with amendments just like other bills. Now, it's usually paragraphs like this that's going to take a little doing, because, boy, they like to be specific in some places, and the specific is long. So, let's read through this once all the way through and then go back to it. Every bill which shall have passed the House of Representatives and the Senate shall, before it becomes a law, be presented to the President of the United States. If he approves, he shall sign it, but if not, he shall return it, with his objections, to that House in which it shall have originated, who shall enter the objections at large on their journal and proceed to reconsider it. If after such reconsideration 2/3 of that House shall agree to pass the bill, it shall be sent, together with the objections, to the other House, by which it shall likewise be reconsidered. And, if approved by 2/3 of that House, it shall become a law. But in all such cases, the votes of both houses shall be determined by yeas and nays, and the names of the persons voting for and against the bill shall be entered on the journal of each house respectively. If any bill shall not be returned by the President within 10 days, Sundays excepted, after it shall have been presented to him, the same shall be a law, in like manner as if he had signed it, unless the Congress, by their adjournment, prevent its return, in which case it shall not be a law. And you caught the end there. You're really starting to see the negative reinforcement loophole closure that they were trying to go for here. Like, okay, if the president doesn't, what happens if he doesn't send it back? When this is all about presidential vetoes and 2/3 majority to override a veto, right? So, if he doesn't send it back within 10 days, then we just act like he signed it because, we've got stuff to do. Oh, but what if he tries to send it back, but Congress sneakily adjourned and left, so he couldn't send it back in order to make sure it's a law? No, sneaky, unless you're by adjournment prevent its return, in which case it shall not be a law. Okay, so they really trying to... This is the testament for why this has stood for so long and not enough people have dissected it to, fix it up, because it's designed to be a labyrinth on purpose. So let's see. Let's see if I can make that easier to read. Every bill which passes the House of Representatives and the Senate gets presented to the president of the United States. Something else we have not discussed so far because it's not in the document yet. Who's the president? What does that mean? Why does anyone care? We haven't got there yet. We need like a glossary of terms right up at the top before the rewriting actually happens. Let's see. So it gets sent to the President of the United States before it can become law. If President approves, he signs it. But if the President does not approve, he must return it with his objections. So like, why don't you, not just sign and say I don't like it. You have to say why. You do have to be like, well, what's the problem? With his objections to whichever house it first came from. That house enters the objections in their journal and can proceed to reconsider it. Because it doesn't, you don't have to, right? Objections to the other house, by which it shall likewise be, let's see, sent together with the objections to the house, by which it shall likewise be reconsidered. No, that's the first one. Let's go back up. That's too far. Let's see. If he approves, he shall sign it, but if not, he shall return it with his objections to that house in which it shall have originated, who shall enter the objections at large on their journal and proceed to reconsider it. So you could proceed to reconsider it, but you don't, the wording here does assume that they're going to, right? Because they might have to change it, or if they don't want to make the changes, or if they want to drop it entirely. You know, once a bill gets vetoed, sometimes it's dropped entirely and they don't bother because they know they're not going to have the 2/3 in both houses to try to push it through. And what the objection was too crucial to what the core of it wanted to do, so they know that it's just going to get vetoed again if they try to push it through without changing the objections. So, you know, they can proceed to reconsider it. I think can is an important element in that sentence. But of course they don't have to. They could just table it, or they could just scrap it if it's been vetoed and they don't think they're going to have either the willingness to change the parts that were the objections, or a 2/3 majority in both houses to override a veto. So then, if after reconsidering the bill, 2/3 of that house agree to pass it, the bill gets sent with the objections to the other house to be reconsidered. If this house also agrees by 2/3 to pass the bill again, because remember, this already got passed and sent to the president once, it becomes law. In all such cases, the votes in both houses are determined by the yeas and nays, and the names of all congressional members voting for or against the bill gets entered into the journal of each house respectively. After being given the bill, if the president does not return that bill within 10 days, excluding Sundays, it will automatically be a law, just as if he had signed it. Sorry, comma, unless in that time Congress adjourns, so it cannot be returned, then it is not a law. Didn't really cut down much there in terms of length, but definitely did, I think, in terms of readability. So let's roll through these each one time again and see how it sounds differently. Every bill which shall have passed the House of Representatives and the Senate shall, before it becomes a law, be presented to the President of the United States. If he approves, he shall sign it. But if not, he shall return it with his objections to that house in which it shall have originated, who shall enter the objections at large on their journal and proceed to reconsider it. If after such reconsideration 2/3 of that house shall agree to pass the bill, it shall be sent together with the objections to the other house, by which it shall likewise be reconsidered, and if approved by 2/3 of that house, it shall become a law. But in all such cases, the votes of both houses shall be determined by yeas and nays, and the names of the persons voting for and against the bill shall be entered on the journal of each house respectively. If any bill shall not be returned by the President within 10 days, Sundays excepted, after it shall have been presented to him, the same shall be a law, in like manner as if he had signed it, unless the Congress by their adjournment prevent its return, in which case it shall not be a law. Every bill which passes the House of Representatives and the Senate gets presented to the President of the United States before it can become a law. If the President approves, he signs it, but if the President does not approve, he must return it with his objections to whichever house it first came from. That house enters the objections in their journal and can proceed to reconsider it. If, after reconsidering the bill, 2/3 of that house agree to pass it, the bill gets sent with the objections to the other house to be reconsidered. If this house also agrees by 2/3 to pass the bill again, it becomes law. In all such cases, the votes in both houses are determined by the yeas and nays, and the names of all congressional members voting for or against the bill gets entered into the journal of each house respectively. After being given the bill, if the President does not return the bill within 10 days, excluding Sundays, it will automatically be a law, just as if he had signed it. Unless in that time Congress adjourns, so it cannot be returned, then it is not a law. That feels way better to me. That feels far easier for people to read. It's still quite a paragraph of legal specificity, but that's what we're going for here. Now, this paragraph is a great example of why we really needed to eliminate a lot of this language and fix it, because this entire thing could simply be a sentence over here, because this is the sentence that really kind of establishes or this paragraph, this section 7, second paragraph of section 7, article 1, determines how the bills become laws in the process, right? And this is the very basic rule set. Then we get down here, and they realized, I think, that this rule set can be applied to everything that isn't necessarily a bill, but anything that does require congressional voting. So let's read this. Every order, resolution, or vote to which the concurrence of the Senate and House of Representatives may be necessary, except on a question of adjournment, shall be presented to the President of the United States, and before the same shall take effect, shall be approved by him, or being disapproved by him, shall be repassed by 2/3 of the Senate and House of Representatives according to the rules and limitations prescribed in the case of a bill. This is just saying that all the rules that we just had up here, those apply to every order and resolution and every vote, everything that Congress has to agree on and everything that Congress is voting on, except their ability to adjourn, right? We don't have to send the votes to adjournment to the president to see if he can agree on adjourning Congress or not. But everything else is the same process. See, and before the same shall take effect. This same is referring to whatever we're talking about, the order, the resolution, the vote. Before that takes effect, he's got to approve it or disapprove it, 2/3, House of Representatives, blah, 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 blah. This could easily, if we were rewriting this rather than rewording it, this should easily be an extra sentence in the last paragraph rather than an entire paragraph re-explaining itself again. But that's not what we're doing. First, we're rewording it. Once we reword it, that's hard to say. Then I think once it's at a reading level everyone can get, then we can start going through it the next pass through and figuring out all the ways that we have to improve it, because it is nonsense in a lot of places. So, every order, resolution, or vote necessary for both houses to agree on, that's what a concurrence is, except adjournment, gets presented to the President of the United States. And before the item in question, rather than before the same, capital S, takes effect, must be approved or disapproved by the president. If disapproved, the item must be repassed by 2/3 of both houses individually, not 2/3 of both houses combined, not a combined 2/3. This is, again, it seems like that's not necessarily the thing we would need to specify, but we absolutely need to specify. We are being just as sneaky about loopholes as the people who tried to write this the first time. According to the same rules and limitations, right? Limitations. Prescribed in the here's what I'm saying. Prescribed above in the case of a bill. And that's literally what that was. Every order, resolution, or vote necessary. Nope. Try again. Necessary. Necessara. Every order, resolution, or vote necessary for both houses to agree on, except adjournment, gets presented to the President of the United States, and before the item in question takes effect, must be approved or disapproved by the President. If disapproved, the item must be repassed by 2/3 of both houses individually, according to the same rules and limitations prescribed above in the case of a bill. Just an added sentence to say, this isn't just bills. This section, paragraph 2, section 7, is not just bills. It's orders. It's, resolutions. It's votes. All right. And that puts us into section 7. We're actually clipping through this now. Because my notes are almost over, because I didn't even get to all of the... See, this section 8 here has got all of the things that Congress is allowed to do. At least most of the specific things, I should say, that Congress is allowed to do. So let's read that. Section 8. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, but in all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. Taxes, duties, imposts, and excises are all synonyms. Those are all taxes. Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes. That's it. We don't need any of the other three things in this sentence. To pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, but all duties, imposts, and excises. This is specifically didn't mention taxes. The duties, the imposts, and the excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. Questioningly interesting, that one. So, federal taxes all have to be the same, according to this. You know, they shall be uniform throughout the United States. So if a tax rate is like 10% for federal something or other, it's 10% in every state. It's not going to be 15% in some other state, because that's not what this says. At least, you know, constitutionally speaking. So, Congress, we don't need the Congress. Congress has the power to charge, to lay and collect. To lay is to charge, and collect taxes I really want to just stop with taxes, because duties, imposts, and excises are all the definitions here. Let's go through the calendar again just to show you, because it's ridiculous. Was this excises? All right, so that's the closest one or two. Let's go to excises. ENEP. Here we go. An excise. A tax levied upon various commodities by several acts of Parliament and collected by officers appointed for that purpose. An excise is a tax. How about imposts? It was impost, right? Yeah, imposts. impignorant, importer, importune, imposable, imposer, imposition, imposts. An impost, a tax, a toll, a custom paid. These are all exactly the same word. I think we're keeping it there. If our job is to simplify this so that it means what it means, we don't need 4 other words for the same synonym here. Imposts, excises, duties. Congress has the power to charge and collect taxes. In order to pay the debts, in order to pay the debt and to pay the debts and provide for the common and pay the debts, provide for the common defense, general welfare of the United States. But all taxes must be uniform throughout the United States. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, but all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. That's exactly what this says here. Congress has the power to charge and collect taxes in order to pay the debts, provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. That's all one. Again, look at the syntax. It's an important element of it. No, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense. That's actually, you know what? That is actually betterly important while I'm reading it myself. This is why I want more people in here to read with me. Congress has the power to charge and collect taxes in order to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. So it gives you the power and it gives you the reason right there. But all taxes must be uniform throughout the United States. Well, now I've got to pull my pen out here, because that's where the end of my notes are. Didn't get into this big list of things, but we can do that together, because this is not so bad. Let's see. So this continues to be a list of things that Congress has the power to do, right? The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, to do this, to do that, but all the taxes have to be uniform throughout the United States. It doesn't end in a period here. This is, again, another semicolon at the end, in order to say that Congress has the power to do all of these other things as well. So that's the first thing we're going to fix and add here. Let's see. Guess I don't really need to use. I was going to write this down physically while I'm doing it this way, and I'm like, why? Why bother doing? Why bother taking the notes after the fact while I'm doing it right now? Let's see. So speaking of syntax, it would be a lot better if we had just this sentence: the Congress shall have power to, and then put a colon right there, and then this should have been the first bullet point, like these are down here. But as long as we understand that, we're not going to change that part right now. Again, we're not changing, remember, we're just rewording. So, to borrow money on the credit of the United States. Let's see, so Congress has the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. What? Why didn't you do what I want? I don't see any reason to change that one. To borrow money on the credit of the United States. Easy. To regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. We're gonna rewrite that a little bit because I think it doesn't sound as good as to regulate commerce among the several states. That should have been first, I think. Among the several states and with the indigenous tribes and with foreign nations. See, we're ending all of these with a semicolon because this is a big list now. Let's see, to regulate commerce with foreign, it says foreign nations first, and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. Yeah, obviously we need to change a lot of that kind of language to indigenous, maybe even indigenous peoples would be better. Wish I had some in chat. Maybe you could tell me what the correct one is. To regulate commerce among the several states and with the indigenous people and with foreign nations. Yeah. Indigenous population instead of tribes. Tribes does seem... I mean, everything from the perspective of the United States government when dealing with indigenous of the Americas is probably pretty offensive and bad, just historically, for everything, always. So not a great way to deal with that ever. Unless they just want to give all the land back. What do you think, boys? Let's see. To establish an uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States. Okay, so we do want to fix a little bit of that language. So they can to establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform bankruptcy. Bankruptcy? 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 Is bankruptcy? That looks so funny to me. Bankruptcy? That can't be right. That's pretty funny. To establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform bankruptcy. No, there's a C, that's why. T-C. Why? Bankrupt. C. Bankruptcy. Yes, that's okay, just not reading the thing I'm looking at myself. But bankruptcy is way funnier. How about uniform bankruptcy uh-ohs? No, we can't do it. Now I'm just having fun now because I'm already tired and low energy. To establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States. So to establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform bankruptcy laws throughout the United States. I don't have to be quite so wordy and quite so silly with all of it. Let's see. To coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. And fix the standard of weights and measures. Okay, so to coin money. Okay. To coin money. Now, do we want to say that that's print now? Do we want to say print money? To coin money. Regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin, and of to coin money, regulate the, to coin money and of foreign coin. That doesn't see what I mean when we start to run into things that like they didn't think it was going to make sense. Let's look up coin as a verb. Let's find this in here. Went too far. Coin. Money stamped with legal impression. To coin. To stamp metals for money. To make or invent. To make or forge anything in an ill sense. To stamp metals for money. To make or invent. So if you coin something, that's true. If you coin a phrase, right? To make or forge anything. So, to coin money, to make or invent. So what if we said to create money, to create and regulate the value of money? This is what this is. So, to create and regulate the value of money. Right, now we need to specify that actually, because create and regulate together is different than to create money and regulate the value of money. Sounds, again, could be a little redundant, but sometimes redundancy is good. To create money and regulate the value of money and of foreign coin and of, so the and of foreign coin is referring to regulating the value of the foreign coin compared to yourself. So to create money and regulate the value of both domestic and foreign money. And fix the standard of weights and measures. And fix the standard. Fix in this case is also like create. You're fixing a standard. You're affixing it really for the standard of weights and measures, which I don't think I have to tell anybody who's not American. We're the only ones that use all of the nonsense we do for our weights and measures. And the whole world would operate so much easier if we would stop our nonsense by the mile, and yard, gallon, feet. It is pretty silly. see, to fix, so fix the standard of weights and measures. Let's look up, say, well, I mean, we got the big dictionary here. Let's keep using it. Let's see if there's an interesting definition for fix. Fixation, to fix. There we go. To make fast, firm, or stable, to settle, to establish, invariably, to direct without variation, to deprive of a volatility. That's quite a definition of fix. To settle the opinion, to determine the resolution, to rest, to cease to wander, to lose fluidity, so as to become malleable. Okay. To make fast, firm, or stable, to settle, to establish invariably. See, there we go. To establish the standard of weights and measures. This is why we pull out the big dictionary here. We love our 1828 dictionary. And establish the standard of weights. Weights, come on, capital weights. And measures. There we go. Okay, to coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. So to create money and regulate the value of both domestic and foreign money, and establish the standards of weights and measures. Solid. To provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States. Securities and current coin. So is this just another example of them using too many synonyms all the time because they wanted to provide for, so Congress can determine the punishment for counterfeiting money, the securities and current coin of the United States. Let's look up securities. Now I'm knee deep into this great PDF here. Sheepish. Septuple. A security. Let's see. Carelessness, freedom from fear, confidence, want of diligence, protection, defense, anything that gives as a pledge or caution, insurance, assurance for anything, the act of giving caution or being bound, safety. Is that the right? Security? Security. Securities. Carelessness, freedom, confidence, want of diligence, act of giving cautions, assurance, anything given as a pledge, insurance. So securities, given that it's defined as an insurance as well, a security can be an insurance, then in the most monetary sense, counterfeiting the securities is, I mean, we might not change that at that point. If it does in fact mean what it means. Like the counterfeiting the assurances, the insurances that the nation would, if you were selling fake government bonds, right? Like that's what this means for securities. Like you've counterfeited a security that is supposed to be backed by the United States, but you faked it. So to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities. Yeah, I think securities is going to have to stay the same. And current money of the United States. So again, not much different. A lot of these I don't think are going to be that particularly different, but we do want to spend the right amount of time getting exactly these things right, because these are all precise things that Congress has the power to do. The first part of this should have been a bullet point. Congress shall have the power to, bullet point. And the rest of these are bullet points. Lay and collect taxes and all that. Borrow money, credit of the United States, commerce with foreign nations, establish rule of naturalization, to coin money and regulate value, to provide for punishment of countering security. This is all stuff that Congress can do specifically and deliberately. So we do want to make sure we don't give them too much power. Or too little, to be fair. To establish post offices and post roads. Post roads. Back when roads were not a thing that was everywhere. I don't think there's anything we got to change here. Now, why is post offices... See, it bothers me that this is not capitalized here in this one. Post offices and post roads. Let me look at, I'll look at my physical copy just for a second, just to make sure. So always double checking some things. Let's see. Yep. Post offices and not capitalized post, but capitalized roads. Why? Why, everybody? Oh well. Post offices and post roads. Simple. What is a post road? Just a road that the post office uses? Is it one that only the post office can use? Is it a toll road? Because when you send stuff via post, you have to pay for it. There's all kinds of things that need to be more adequately explained in this tiny, vague document. All right, so Congress will also have the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So, we've hit the ability to copyright things. A contentious thing these days. Who has the rights for things? And if you're a creative and if you're someone who's making your own stuff and other people want to have the rights to your things versus giant megacorps being the ones that own most of everything at the time. Hard to say. To promote the progress. The Congress has the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts. We're going to keep that the same. Promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So that's a definition of copywriting, really. It's clumsily put together. By securing, so they promote the science of progress and useful arts by securing the exclusive right of authors and inventors by securing exclusive right by secure for authors and inventors by securing for authors and inventors. That's what we want to do. By securing for authors and inventors, we move the limited time to the end as a specification. By securing for authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries for limited times. That's much better. They like to throw so many commas, and I think the hemp they were growing at the time really influenced a lot of their writing styles, because it keeps interrupting itself to throw other points inside of other points that should be towards the end. So, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. To promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries for limited times. I think that sounds a lot better. To constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. Again, something that we have not seen so far. We have not got to the article that establishes the Supreme Court. And this Supreme Court's not even capitalized. To constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. So, yeah, tribunal courts, really. Let's look up tribunal. Tribunal is a good word to look up here. What exactly did they want by that? Tribunal. The seat of a judge, a court of justice. Okay, yeah. As we assume, nothing surprising there. So, courts. So a court of justice. So to constitute courts inferior to the Supreme, to constitute courts. Constitute courts. That sounds silly. Let's look up constitute. We're going to see. We are absolutely using synonyms here to make sure that we're correct, and that we're also making this easier to understand and read by doing it. Constitutional, constitute. To constitute, to give formal existence, to produce, to erect, to establish, to depute, to appoint another to an office, to constitute, to establish. So a lot of establishing is happening here, obviously, because this is the document that established the country. So I think we want to go with to establish, if we could spell it right, establish courts inferior. Let's look up this one too, because I'm going to use lower to the Supreme Court, lower than the Supreme Court, since it's the highest court in the land. But let's look up inferior. Infant in there it is. Inferior. You are? No, not spelled you are there. Well, let's see. Inferiority, yes, inferiable, inferior. Lower in place, lower in station or rank of life, lower in value of subordinate. Inferior, one in a lower rank station than another. All right, see, so I was going to use lower. That's exactly correct. To establish courts lower than the Supreme Court, which we are going to capitalize this time because it is correct, even though they didn't do it the first time. To constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. You mean to establish courts lower than the Supreme Court? Shut up! I wanted it to sound fancy. Yeah, it's not doing anybody favors any of these days. Let's see. Can we get all the way through? How many of these we got? 18 minutes. Well, some of those are getting kind of big. Let's see how far we get. I'd like to be able to get all the way through section 8 here before we end, so we can start. I like starting new on a fresh section every time. It's great. Let's see. To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. The law of nations? Offenses against the law of nations. That does sound awfully specific. To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the laws of nations. To punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations. You know what? That's another one where I don't think we're doing pretty much anything different. Nothing jumps to mind for an easier way to reword that. The Congress can define and punish piracies and felonies that are committed on the high seas. Now, the issue we're going to run into with a lot of this is what the definitions of these things are versus how they've written it. So what's the high seas now? Is that simply international waters? Is it within our coastal borders? Because Congress certainly doesn't have the right to establish and punish to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on international waters, and offenses against the law of nations. And that's definitely specific to itself. Nothing to change there. Congress has that right. We're going to have to look that, feel free to keep learning outside of these streams, where you can look up these things yourself and say, well, what is the law of nations in this context mean? What were they referring to in 1789? To declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. This is the thing that every executive branch has had a bit of trouble with, because only Congress can declare war. Congress has the power to declare war. Grant letters of marque and reprisal. Those are specific, again, those are specific, like, military definitions in this case. Make rules concerning captures on land and water. Because there was no air. There was no Space Force. So, something else that once we get around to updating it is probably going to have to be updated in terms of definitions, but not particularly bad by itself. To declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water. Not bad. To raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. Okay, so Congress can raise and support armies. So Congress can to raise armies. To raise and support armies. This one feels like it needs to be redone a bit, but how? To raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. So I think we're going to say to build and fund militaries, right? Because to raise and support armies is simply too specifically outdated as like the kind of terms. But no appropriation. I'll get rid of the word appropriation. Oy. Yeah, but no budgeting of money to that, for that, but to build and fund militaries, but no budgeting, but no money budgeted for that use. Can be for a term longer than 2 years. Let's see. To raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 2 years. To build and fund militaries, but no money budgeted for that use for that use can be for a term longer than 2 years. Okay. See, and here's the other one that's like, to provide and maintain a navy. Let's look up provide. Let's look up provide, because it doesn't have the same thing here. To raise and support armies, but to provide and maintain a navy. It is different language that they've used. To provide, to procure beforehand, to get ready, to prepare, to furnish, to supply, to stipulate, to make a conditional limitation, to treasure up for some future occasion, to provide against, to measures or counteracting, to provide for, to take care of beforehand, provided that upon these terms, to provide and maintain a navy. To supply and maintain a navy. I think maybe to provide, to supply, I think. In this case, because they use maintain separately, so to supply and maintain a navy. To make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. To make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. Those seem like two entirely different thoughts. To make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. The land and naval forces. Okay, so to make rules for the government and regulation. Make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. See, this is where we could have used a few commas, maybe. To make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. So I think we need this to be more to make rules for the government to make rule that. See, this is why even I have to read this like 6 times in order to get the cadence correctly, because there's a way that it makes sense when you read it. To make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. So how the land and naval forces are governed and regulated. We needed some commas in there for sure. To make rules. To make rules. This is what's saying. To make rules. To make rules that govern and regulate the land and naval forces. Much better. To provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. How many more of these we got? 2. Oh, wait. So one paragraph, 2 paragraph, 3 paragraph, 4 paragraph. Okay. Yeah, let's see if we can get all the way through. We'll go a little long if we have to get through the rest of section 8 here. To provide for calling forth to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union. So again, to provide, this is really more of a supply, to provide for calling forth because these are provisions that they can do. We're provisioning these rights for the Congress so that they can do these when they need to. You know? That feels a little but I can't think of a better one. I think everybody can get that right. To provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Maybe instead of execute the laws, it should be more of an enforce, right? To provide for calling forth the militia. Now, once we get into things like Second Amendment, the fact that they've capitalized so many of these words do become important in certain areas. Because I personally believe that militia with a capital M here, as they've used it every time, is not just people with, having your own personal right to bear arms and do what have you. This militia is referring to an organized government-led militia, actually, that, if you want to be a part of, you probably have to sign up. To provide for calling forth the militia to enforce the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Okay. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining, see, here we go, the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. This just proves what I just said. If I'd only gone down to the next paragraph, it's right here. Congress can provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So, Congress has the power to provide for to procure beforehand, to get ready, to prepare, to furnish, to supply, to stipulate. I think it's all right. It's just not a word I like using, but it seems like it's fine. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, for governing the part of them as may be employed in the service of the United Okay, so to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia for governing such parts of them as may be employed in the service of the United States. For organizing army and disciplining militia and for governing such part of them as they may be employed. Governing such part. Organizing army, disciplining the militia. I don't know. I don't know if governing seems like it should. In this militia's case, it seems like governing is the word that's throwing me off here. For governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States. How about overseeing? And for governing and for overseeing, because they're still a source of authority for things, but they're not, commanding's not quite right either when it comes to the military. And for overseeing the part of them being employed in the service capitalized service of the United States. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, for overseeing the part of them being employed in the service of the United States, while the appointment of the officers is reserved to states individually. Let's see, reserving this and the appointment of officers and the authority of see, while the appointment of the officers is reserved to states individually, the appointment of officers and training, while the appointment of the officers and militia training is reserved to the states individually. The appointment of the officers and militia training is reserved to the states individually. Discipline prescribed. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for overseeing the part of them being employed in the service of the United States, while the appointment of the officers and militia training is reserved to the states individually, yet according to the rules prescribed by Congress. Let's see how that sounds. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for overseeing the part of them being employed in the service of the United States. Maybe we should capitalize part, since that is also there. Part of them being employed in the service of the United States, while the appointment of the officers and militia training is reserved to states individually, yet according to the rules prescribed by and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed. According to the though let's see. On service, the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. While the let's see, to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for overseeing the part of them being employed in the service of the United States. The appointment of the officers and militia training is reserved to states individually, though according to the methods prescribed by Congress, though see, that's an example of slightly longer, maybe, in order to be more clear. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for overseeing the part of them being employed in the service of the United States. The appointment of the officers and militia training is reserved to states individually, though they must be according to the methods prescribed by Congress. Okay, I like that now. That one was tricky. This is where I like to do my class prep as prep. Oh, here we go. Last two, though. Let's see what we can knock out. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such districts not exceeding 10 miles square, as may, by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of the government of the United States, and to exercise the authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings, and, there's a nice dash and there, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States, or in any department or officer thereof. Let's read that again. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 square miles, as may, by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of the government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. So yeah, this is eminent domain. Something I am passionate about, because it's nonsense. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, not exceeding as may by such a particular. So what this is saying is to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such a district, which is not to exceed this size, as may by the secession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of the government of the United States. So this is establishing Congress as the sole legislative body in D.C. This is what would become D.C. because the secession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, this area that would not exceed 10 square miles, according to this, become the seat of, well, obviously the rest of it, I think they probably changed some of that, but the actual buildings and federal buildings there become the seat of the government in the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. So, over places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be. So, right, this is giving federal congressional power for all military land as well. That's what this is doing. So, how the heck do we simplify that into words that make sense? Because that does make more sense for, again, a future tense kind of thing. We already have a capital now, but they were establishing this as a means to establish a capital. So let's see, over such exclusive legislative body in such district no more than 10 square miles. Listen. seat of government of the United States as to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square, as may, by session of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of government in the United States. To be the exclusive legislative body in such district no more than 10 square miles, that is the seat of government of the United States, as agreed on by Congress and the states involved. Likewise, have authority over all places purchased with the consent of the state legislature in question for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals. These are all specific terms as well. So these we got to keep like exactly. Dockyards and other needful buildings and all right, let's see. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, not exceeding 10 square miles, as may, by cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, become the seat of the government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. So to be the exclusive legislative body in such a district, I mean, we really could take that out at this point, but we shouldn't because it's just rewording. In such district, that is the seat of government, that is the seat of government, in such district that becomes the seat of government, that it to be the exclusive legislature in such a district that is the seat of government of the United States, as agreed on by Congress and the states involved, whose land was used, right? By cession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress, comes by cession. So yeah, so, you know, basically Maryland and Virginia, essentially, to be the exclusive legislative body in such a district that is the seat of government of the United States, as agreed on by Congress and the states involved whose land was used, and likewise have authority over all places purchased with the consent of the state legislatures Let's see, the consent over all places purchased with the consent of state legislatures. The erection of force building within said state. And, okay, that sounds better. To be the exclusive legislative body in such a district, no more than 10 square miles, that is the seat of government of the United States, as agreed on by Congress and the states involved whose land was used, and likewise have authority over all places purchased with the consent of the state legislatures for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings within said state. And, last piece, before we call it quits today, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States, or in any department or officer thereof. To make laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution. So the Congress has the power to make all laws which are necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. Foregoing powers? Let's get one more look up here for foregoing powers. With an E? Foregoing with an E? Yeah, you're foregoing with me with an E. Okay, you didn't spell it wrong at least. Let's see. Foregoer. They got a foregoer. To forego. To quit. To give up. To resign. Ancestor, a progenitor, one who goes before another. Forego. To forego. To quit. So, foregoing powers. To make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the quitting powers and all other powers vested by this foregoing. Carrying the I think they meant that as moving forward, really. The foregoing, I think that is what they actually meant. To make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. This is truly just the fact that the legislature makes all the laws. This is the body that creates the laws. So, to make all laws which are necessary and proper for enforcing, really, carrying into execution, enforcing the foregoing powers and all other powers, foregoing powers, foregoing, you know what? If we can't change it instantly, if we can't figure out a good one, we'll leave it as it is until we get into the rewrite phase. Foregoing powers, because we can get some more research done into that and get more adequately aware of what that is. But for now, we will keep it as foregoing powers. to make all laws which are necessary and proper for enforcing the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution. Vested is like stated. Vested in me. Again, legal terms that I think people kind of generally know just enough of from true crime kind of things. Vestige, vestal, vestibule, vest. Oh wow, some of the scans is not so great. To vest, to dress, to deck, to enrobe, to dress in a long garment. Vest an outer garment. To place in possession. Yes. The other powers placed in possession by this Constitution. Right. So all other powers stated. We're going to use stated. Stated by this Constitution in government of the United States. Or, let's see, to make all laws which are necessary and proper for enforcing the foregoing powers and all other powers stated by this Constitution in the government of the United States, or in any department or through any officer, because an officer is a person, not an office. So let's see, through any department or through any officer of the United States. We're going to be redundant on this because that's easier to do. Let's see. To make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any other department or officer thereof. To make all laws which are necessary and proper for enforcing the foregoing powers and all other powers stated by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any other department or in any department or through any officer of the United States. Okay. Well, that's where we're going to leave it off now. Thanks for sticking with me for extra long time. We will pick up with Article 1, Section 9 next week. Feel free to always go back and read more and research more yourself, as I always encourage that to be the case. We'll get all the way through it, and once we get to the amendments, then everybody's going to really be having fun, because that's the one everybody really wants to get to, I think. Once we get through all the formality of the actual nuts and bolts of how the government is supposed to function. Oh, well, thanks again. I'll see you next week. Same Constitution class, same Constitution channel. Bye.